I never thought a random encounter on a cold November evening would change the way I looked at life, money, and the people we walk past every single day without a second glance. My name is Daniel, and what I'm about to tell you isn't some made-up fairy tale. It's something I lived through, and it shook me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It all began outside a convenience store near my apartment. The weather was brutally cold, the kind of night where even the thought of stepping outside felt like punishment. I had just finished a long shift at work and wanted nothing more than to grab some groceries and head home. As I walked toward the store, I noticed a man sitting against the brick wall near the entrance. His clothes were tattered, his beard untrimmed, and his eyes half hidden beneath the shadow of a hood. At first, I thought nothing of it. It's not unusual to see homeless people near stores in the city, but something about him stopped me in my tracks. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't even looking at people. He sat there calmly, with this strange dignity about him, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. That struck me as odd. Most of the homeless people I'd encountered were usually desperate, calling out to passers-by, holding cardboard signs with shaky handwriting. But this man, he was different. When I came back out with my groceries, I glanced at him again. This time, I noticed a worn leather notebook resting in his lap. He was scribbling something inside with a pen, completely absorbed in his writing, as if the chaos of the city around him didn't even exist. I don't know what got into me, but I couldn't just walk past. Something in me pushed me to speak. "Cold night," I said, trying to break the silence. He looked up slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. They were sharp, piercing, even eyes that didn't match the rest of him. For a split second, I felt like he was looking straight through me, like he knew more about me than I did. "It is," he replied calmly, his voice deeper and more composed than I expected. I hesitated. "You want something warm? Coffee or food, maybe?" He shook his head. "No, thank you. I'm fine." That reply caught me off guard. Most people in his position would have jumped at the offer, but he said it with such conviction, almost like he wasn't the one in need. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. "All right," I said, starting to walk away, but something in me just wouldn't let it go. I turned back. "What are you writing?" He closed the notebook slightly, guarding its contents, and gave a faint smile. "Just reminders." I didn't push further, but that moment stayed with me. Over the next few days, I saw him again, always in the same spot, always with that notebook. Curiosity got the better of me, and eventually, I started bringing him food anyway. Sometimes he accepted it, sometimes he didn't, but he always thanked me politely. One night, after offering him a sandwich, I decided to sit down beside him. "You've got to have a story," I said. "Everybody does. What's yours?" For the first time, he laughed. It wasn't mocking, just amused. "What makes you think you'd believe it if I told you?" "Try me." He studied me for a long moment before sighing. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. My name's Richard. And once upon a time, I wasn't sitting on the street. I was sitting in the boardroom of one of the biggest companies in the city." I blinked. "You're telling me you were a CEO?" "Not just a CEO," he said, his tone firm, almost commanding despite his ragged appearance. "I built a company from the ground up, a company that's still running today. And the funny part? People in that company still know my name. They just don't know where I am or what I've become." I thought he was joking at first, but the look in his eyes told me otherwise. There was no hint of exaggeration, no sign of delusion. He meant every word. "But if that's true," I asked cautiously, "why are you here, on the streets?" Richard leaned back against the wall, his expression unreadable. "Because sometimes losing everything isn't an accident. Sometimes it's a choice." That single sentence hit me like a brick. A choice? Who would choose this? Who would willingly walk away from millions, from luxury, From security to sleep on concrete in the freezing cold. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept visiting him, asking questions, trying to piece together the puzzle. Slowly, he started to open up. Not everything at once. He was careful, selective with his words, but enough to give me glimpses of a life that seemed too incredible to be true. He spoke of deals worth millions, of traveling the world, of standing in rooms filled with powerful people. Yeah, here he was, with nothing but a notebook and a faded jacket. One evening, I asked him straight out, "If you really had all that, how come no one's looking for you? Family, friends, business partners?" His expression darkened. For the first time, I saw pain flicker in his eyes. People only look for you when they need something. When you have nothing left to give, they forget you exist. I felt my throat tighten at his words. There was a truth in them I couldn't deny. The more time I spent with Richard, the more I realized this wasn't some ordinary man who'd fallen on hard times. He was carrying secrets that seemed too big for the sidewalk he sat on. And slowly, very slowly, he began to share them with me. The first secret was about betrayal. He told me about people he trusted most, colleagues, partners, even friends who had turned against him, taking pieces of his empire while smiling to his face. He didn't give me names yet, but the bitterness in his voice made it clear the wounds were still fresh. The second secret was about wealth itself. "Money," he said one night, "is the easiest thing in the world to gain, and the hardest thing in the world to keep, especially when you start believing it's the only thing that defines you." Those words echoed in my head long after I walked away. Who was this man really? Was he some genius who'd been wronged by the system? Or was he just telling stories to pass the time? I didn't know, but I wanted to. Because deep down, I felt like I was standing on the edge of uncovering something huge, and part of me was terrified of what I might find. The night I truly started to believe Richard was telling the truth was colder than usual. I brought him a hot coffee, and instead of drinking it right away, he set it beside him and stared out at the streetlights like he was watching ghosts walk by. "You want to know how it happened?" he said quietly, before I could even ask. "How a man with more money than he could spend ends up with nothing but a notebook and the pavement under his back." I nodded, trying not to sound too eager. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "It didn't start with greed, it started with ambition. That's the part people always get wrong. They think men like me were always hungry for power, always chasing more, never satisfied. But that's not how it began. I wanted to build something that mattered." He told me about the early days, back when he was in his 20s. He had nothing but an idea and the stubbornness to see it through. He worked out of a cramped apartment with broken blinds and barely enough money for food. He described coding late into the night, pitching to investors who laughed him out of their offices, and surviving on black coffee and hope. "But eventually," he said, his voice carrying both pride and bitterness, "I found the right people. Or at least, I thought I did. 2 partners, friends from college. We shared the same dream. Or so I believed. We scraped every dime together. We sacrificed everything. And somehow, against all odds, the company took off." "What kind of company was it?" I asked. He gave me a sideways glance, as if weighing whether to tell me. "Tech. Let's leave it at that. Doesn't matter what the product was, what matters is, people wanted it. And when people want something, money follows. Faster than you can imagine." His tone darkened as he went on. "At first, it was everything I ever dreamed of. We were hiring employees, moving into real offices, flying across the country to meet clients. My name started appearing in magazines, my face in interviews. Suddenly, I wasn't some broke kid in a tiny apartment. I was the man in the suit, the man people envied. But that's the thing about reaching the top. It changes the way people look at you, and it changes the way you look at them." He paused, rubbing his hands together as though trying to warm more than just his skin. "You'd think success brings people together. It doesn't. It divides them." My partners started looking at me differently. The same guys who once cheered for me, who stayed up all night working beside me, began whispering behind my back. I saw it in their eyes. They wanted what I had. The power, the recognition, the control. I frowned. But you were all building it together, right? That's what I thought, Richard said bitterly. But power has a way of poisoning loyalty. They began taking meetings without me, signing deals I never approved. Then one day, I walked into the office and discovered my name had been quietly removed from documents I'd written myself. They were cutting me out piece by piece, while smiling to my face. The anger in his voice was sharp, but underneath it I heard something else hurt. Betrayal that went deeper than business. What did you do? I asked softly. What could I do? He gave a hollow laugh. I fought back, hired lawyers, took them to court. But here's what no one tells you. Money doesn't just buy comfort. It buys silence. It buys friends. It buys influence in rooms you'll never see. My partners had already been buying people off long before I realized what was happening. Judges, regulators, even some of my own employees. People I trusted. Everyone has a price, Daniel. Everyone. He stopped then, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with memories. They stripped me of everything. Not just the company, my reputation, my credibility. By the time the court case was over, they painted me as the greedy founder who couldn't share power, who lost his mind chasing control. The media ate it up. I went from visionary to villain. Overnight. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to doubt him. Stories like that sound like something out of a movie. But the way he spoke, it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for sympathy. It was raw, jagged truth. And your money? I asked cautiously. Richard sighed. They made sure that disappeared too. You don't just lose a company, you lose your stock, your shares, your assets tied up in lawsuits. By the time I realized what they were doing, my accounts were frozen, my property seized, even my home. I shook my head in disbelief. But you must have had something stashed away, some kind of savings? He gave me a faint smile. That's what everyone assumes. But when you're at the top, you don't think about saving. You think about growing, expanding, doubling down. I reinvested every cent back into the company because I believed in it. I believed in us. That's how they gutted me so completely. The way he said us carried a weight I couldn't ignore. What about family? I asked carefully. Didn't anyone help? His eyes hardened and he looked away. For the first time, I saw a flash of something like shame. Family, he said flatly, isn't always what you think it is. My father passed when I was young. My mother never forgave me for chasing dreams instead of stability. And when the money disappeared, so did everyone else. Friends, relatives, they all stopped answering my calls. Some even went on TV to distance themselves from me. Nobody wants to stand next to a fallen giant. They'd rather pretend they never knew you. The silence between us stretched long and heavy. I wanted to say something comforting, but what words could possibly ease that kind of pain? Finally, I asked, so, how do you go from losing everything to sitting here on the street? You could have gotten another job. You're smart, experienced. Someone would have hired you. Richard chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. When your name is dragged through the mud, no one wants you. Doors close before you can knock. And even if they opened, I couldn't do it. Not after what I saw. Not after what I learned about the cost of ambition. You think sitting here is rock bottom. But let me tell you something, Daniel. Sometimes rock bottom is freedom. Nobody expects anything from me here. Nobody betrays me here. For the first time in years, I'm not chasing or defending anything. I just exist. I stared at him, speechless. He looked like a man broken and yet, in some strange way, whole. You're telling me you chose this? I finally whispered. Yes, he said firmly. I chose it. Not at first. No, I fought tooth and nail to hold on. But eventually, I realized the fight itself was killing me. And when you realize you've been fighting for something that was never real to begin with, you let go. The way he said it sent chills through me. That night, I walked home with my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew about success, about failure, about the people we overlook it, all felt upside down. I couldn't stop thinking about Richard. If what he said was true, then the man the world believed was a washed-up failure was actually sitting on the street by choice. And more than that, he seemed freer than anyone I knew, with a job, a car, a mortgage, or a bank account. But deep down, I knew his story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I was about to find out just how much darker it really was. When I met Richard the next evening, he looked different. Not in appearance, he was still wrapped in the same worn coat, still clutching his battered notebook, but in his eyes, there was a sharpness there, like a man who had been circling the edges of truth and was finally ready to step across. "You think my story ended when I lost my company," he said, as soon as I sat down. "But the truth is, that was only the beginning. What came after, that's what really destroyed me." I leaned closer, my pulse quickening. He tapped the notebook in his lap. "Do you know why I keep this? It's not for me. It's for the world to remember what really happened. Because the story you'll read in the papers is a lie, a neat, polished lie designed to protect people with power. But this," he tapped it again, "this is the truth. And someday, someone like you is going to hear it. Maybe you'll believe me. Maybe you won't. But you'll carry it." I swallowed hard. "Tell me." He drew in a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought he might back out. But then his voice steadied. "When my partners cut me out, I thought it was just about money, control, the company. That's what I told myself. That's what I fought them over in court. But what I didn't realize then was that the company was only the surface. Underneath it, we'd built something far more dangerous." I frowned. "Dangerous how?" Richard's eyes locked on mine. "We weren't just selling software. We were collecting data. Millions of people's information, habits, preferences, locations. At first, it was harmless, just numbers and trends. But then, we realized how much power it gave us. Power to predict. Power to manipulate. Governments, corporations, even foreign buyers, they all wanted it. And my partners? They were only too eager to sell." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Are you saying your company was spying on people?" He gave a grim nod. "And worse, we started tailoring decisions, nudging choices, shaping what people believed. All under the guise of convenience and progress. But when I realized where it was heading, I tried to stop it. I wanted out. That's when they turned on me, because I wasn't just a partner anymore. I was a liability." My mouth went dry. "You mean they ruined you because you tried to blow the whistle?" "Exactly." His voice was sharp, bitter. "They didn't just want me out of the company. They wanted me erased. My credibility shredded. My voice silenced. Because if I spoke, if anyone believed me, it could have destroyed them all." The pieces began to click together in my mind. The lawsuits, the headlines painting him as unstable, the way his money had vanished so completely. "They didn't just betray me," Richard went on. "They buried me alive. And it worked. Nobody listens to the man screaming on the street corner. Nobody believes the homeless drunk who says he once had it all. I became invisible, Daniel. And in that invisibility, I found a kind of freedom." I sat back, stunned. "So, all this time, you've been carrying that truth, and no one knows." He gave a hollow laugh. "Oh, people know. The right people, the ones who profited, they know. But the rest of the world, they'll never hear it. Because it's easier to dismiss me as a failure than to admit the system itself is rotten." The silence between us was heavy. Cars passed. Voices echoed from nearby streets. but it all felt distant. Finally, I asked, "Why are you telling me this? Why now?" Richard studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing like he was weighing something important. "Because you asked. Nobody ever asks. People drop coins, offer sandwiches, but they never ask who I am. You did, and maybe that means you'll carry it forward. Maybe one day you'll tell this story, not for me, but for the truth." His words lodged deep inside me, heavier than any secret I'd ever heard. Over the following weeks, I visited Richard almost every night. He told me more about the people who had betrayed him, about the compromises he refused to make, about the long nights he spent hiding from the consequences of knowing too much. The more he spoke, the more I realized his story wasn't just about him. It was about the world we lived in. A world where success could be a mask for corruption, and failure could be the only honest choice left. But there was still one question gnawing at me. One night, as we sat watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky, I asked, "Do you regret it? If you could go back, would you do it differently?" Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I regret trusting the wrong people. I regret thinking loyalty was stronger than greed. But walking away? Losing everything? No. Because in losing it, I found myself. And that's something they'll never understand." His voice carried a strange kind of peace, like a man who had finally made peace with his ghosts. And then, one night, he was gone. I came to the spot where he always sat, but the sidewalk was empty. The notebook he always carried was gone too. For days, I searched. I asked around, checked shelters, even went to hospitals. No one had seen him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. At first, I was devastated. I felt like I'd lost something irreplaceable, a mentor, a friend, a window into truths I'd never have seen otherwise. But then I remembered his words. "Someday, someone like you will hear it. Maybe you'll believe me. Maybe you won't. But you'll carry it." And I realized that was the point. Richard's story wasn't meant to be tied to him alone. It was meant to live on, carried by anyone willing to listen. So here I am, telling it to you, to whoever will hear. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people aren't the ones in boardrooms or on magazine covers. Sometimes they're sitting quietly on a street corner, holding secrets too heavy for the world to bear. Richard was more than a homeless man, more than a fallen CEO. He was a mirror held up to everything we don't want to admit about ambition, power, and the cost of truth. And though I may never see him again, I know this. His story will never leave me. And now, it won't leave you either.